Okay, are we ready? Hello, my name's Audrey Davis. I'm Mohawk Six Nations Reserve Turtle Clan. I want to start by thanking all my brothers and sisters, allies, and friends who've come out to support this important message today. We'll be talking about the ongoing oppression, discrimination, and racism that leads to violence that Indigenous and other marginalized people experience. So there is not simply a long history of violence by colonial law enforcement agencies against Indigenous peoples in Canada. Such acts are the foundation of Canadian history. These institutions have been instrumental in the execution of historical atrocities and acts of aggression, such as the Canadian Indigenous residential schools, the 60 Scoop, the Oka Crisis, the Ipperwash Crisis, live birth alerts, Crown warships, and Starlight tours. They continue to perpetuate or contribute to modern injustices such as the continuing crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Land Back 1492, the Wet'suwet'en demonstrations, instances of police brutality, and the death of Indigenous suspects, and many others. While some efforts are being made to address these past and present harms, no part of Canada is untouched by violence and discrimination against Indigenous peoples. Across this country, Indigenous peoples have vocalized the harm done by law enforcement agencies, but all too often their stories are not taken seriously or dismissed, or it is they who are victimized. As a result, it is important to call attention to these matters as they arise, call them out for what they are, and advocate for change that is already too late in coming. The City of Hamilton and the Hamilton Police Services are not exempt from these occurrences of acts of racism, discrimination, and violence against Indigenous people. Recently, one of our Indigenous relatives experienced a vicious assault by a police officer. On June 16, 2020, the Hamilton Police Services released a statement containing the following information about this incident. On May 26, 2020, Hamilton Police obtained a video from a commercial establishment and a citizen following the arrest of a suspect in a stolen vehicle investigation. The level of force used by one officer during the interaction resulted in a separate criminal investigation. The officer was immediately suspended. As a result of the investigation, Constable Brian Wren has been charged with assault level 1. His first court appearance was July 21st, 2022. Although there has been progress in attempting to develop trusting relationships with law enforcement agencies, society must always hold police accountable when unwarranted acts of violence are inflicted upon members of the Indigenous community or any other community. We must hold both the individual police agent and the institution that employs the police officer accountable for this violence. In the spirit of reconciliation, we call for the following action items to be completed. In the matter of Constable Brian Wren, 1, that the Hamilton Police Service and Crown Prosecutor's Office ensure that Constable Brian Wren faced appropriately serious consequences for his violent actions, whether that be under Canada's colonial legal system, professionally, and or financially. And 2, that a transparent and, if needed, third-party investigation occur into whether or not Constable Brian Wren's actions constitute a hate crime. And 3, that investigations occur into any alleged prior instances of police brutality or harassment against the victim in this matter by any member of the Hamilton Police Service. And 4, that commitments be made that the Hamilton Police Services will take seriously and investigate all allegations of police misconduct or brutality against Indigenous individuals or against members of any marginalized group, without requiring there to be video evidence before they do so. The next piece is systemic changes to the Hamilton Police Services. The first recommendation is that an Indigenous liaison officer who is recognized as being part of the Indigenous community and who will be present in Indigenous spaces. And two, an Indigenous police board seat that will continuously provide Indigenous representation at the Hamilton Police Service Board level, and the candidate be an acknowledged and connected member of the Indigenous community in the city of Hamilton. And three, a commitment to provide ongoing, in-depth Indigenous cultural safety, capacity, sensitivity training that exceeds the current allocated timeframes for such training to occur. And four, the immediate creation of an interim hate crime review circle that includes members of the community, particularly the Indigenous community, and one that is exempt from a Hamilton Police Services staff presence. Five, that the immediate development and implementation of an Indigenous advisory position to serve as an advisor and or consultant to senior leadership positions within the Hamilton Police Services institution. This person must be able to provide an Indigenous perspective on Indigenous ways of being and ways of life when matters concerning Indigenous people or land arise, and when decisions that will have an impact on Indigenous people are made by the police. Six, the immediate installation of body cams on every Hamilton Police Services uniform and the immediate installation of dash cams in every Hamilton Police Services vehicle. Seven, and the last one, the immediate development of a committee that will work towards implementing the TRC calls to actions and the Missing and Murder Indigenous Women and Girls Two-Spirit calls for justice that will influence positive change regarding police interactions with Indigenous people. This act affects us all, as violence and discrimination against Indigenous people has always been an all too common feature of Canadian society. This needs to stop. Education, prevention, and accountability must be of the highest priority in law enforcement and in all aspects of Canadian life if there is ever to be a path towards true reconciliation. We call on all residents of Hamilton to demand better. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Has the Hamilton Indian Regional Center actually seen the video of the incident? Have you spoken to the Indigenous man who was allegedly assaulted?
We actually have workers connected with the Indigenous man, but no, we have not seen the video.
Audrey, what would it mean if this assault, alleged assault, is prosecuted as a hate crime?
What would it mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully it would bring about all these recommendations, action on these recommendations of the Hamilton Police Services. We as the Indigenous community put forward these recommendations, but it has to be a collaborative. The Hamilton Police Services has to step up and work towards these goals.
How's the police response been to your concerns so far?
Well, they did reach out in June after the incident happened in either April or March. Which month it was? Was it March?
May.
Oh, it was in May. They reached out in June through a police officer directly to me. I'm by no means the Indigenous community. I'm a leader of one of the organizations. They did reach out to me, and so far a meeting date hasn't been established.
What do you make of the fact that apparently the SIU decided that there was nothing in this incident to be pursued, and then it was the Hamilton police who actually investigated it further and laid a charge?
Right, that was because the video came forward, right?
Okay.
Right.
So if the SIU had seen the video, it might have been different.
It might have been different, right?
It was said in the release that this is not the first time that this has happened to this particular individual. Can you speak to that? That this is something that this person has experienced before, and were there no consequences previously when it happened?
Right, and that is true. I have not met the individual myself, but my staff have and do work with him, and we are quite aware that he has been assaulted prior by the Hamilton Police Services, a member of the Hamilton Police Services. I can't confirm who the officer was, but yeah, there was no charges, no follow-up happened as a result of that. But there was also no video, right? So.
What's your understanding of what actually happened in that incident? All we've heard so far is the aggressive use of force by the police. What happened?
He was, like I said, he was being arrested for a stolen vehicle incident and excessive use of force, where he was charged with resisting arrest. Um, um, it's understood. I clearly understand that sometimes police do have to use a little more force when people are resisting. But when it comes to excessive use, where there's bodily injuries um, that are serious, that is excessive use. So, as for all those more details, I don't know, but I know that this person is a victim. Um, Brutality is beyond the, you know, beyond what is needed to take this person into custody. You know, so it was excessive if he required medical attention.
So he has a picture on what I understood to be his Facebook page, which shows him with a black eye. Was that from the incident?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you have any statistics or information regarding police brutality against Indigenous people in Hamilton?
I don't have any. I don't know if Jordan, do you have any numbers? Do you have any numbers? No,
Can you
no,
speak
but
to
it
the
can be.
prevalence?
Well, Indigenous people are overrepresented in every sector of social ills, including justice, right? And arrest. People incarcerated, Indigenous women and men, far exceed in proportionality any percentage of other cultures. So obviously it's not, Indigenous people are not, don't lean towards being criminal. What causes it? Why do we end up in jail, in courts, in police custody more often than others?
So just speaking to your press release, I did recall seeing in there that you spoke of disproportionate violence against Indigenous people and people of color in the city of Hamilton. And so, like, do you have more instances and examples of other people in the community who have experienced similar violence?
Yeah, but none we can speak to because there's actually no charges laid, right? No investigations. It's just the norm. You know, it's the norm to hear, not that it's ever accepted or that it's ever, you know, you become accustomed to it, but it's the norm to hear of people being violated and excessive force or injustices, discrimination, blatant racism used against Indigenous people, yes. And I'm sure any other minority could speak to the same thing, you know,
The police
of having
service.
that.
Sorry, were you? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you finished? Or?
Yep.
The police service said last week that Chief Frank Bergen was attempting to reach out to local Indigenous leaders and create some sort of meeting. Have you heard from him at all?
We're working with him to try and set up a meeting, right? And it just hasn't happened yet.
And in terms of these recommendations, there seems to be a whole lot of recommendations, and you're calling for kind of the immediate implementation of them. In some of these instances, they might need to request funding, or they might need to expand their funding, or that sort of thing. I wonder, is there a time frame or a timeline for the ones that maybe can't be, implemented immediately?
I think when we say immediate, we need to start taking immediate action, right? So you immediately take action to secure cameras, body cams and cameras. You immediately take action to bring together an advisory table, right? Whether it's, I work in the not-for-profit world. I know what the slow timelines are, how things take time, recognize that. But I think accountability on the part of the police in start to action these different items, whether it be putting an application for funding or having discussions about what a table would look like, with the Indigenous community. Yeah, so when we speak of immediate, we want immediate response to the action items.
And what was it about this incident that spurred all these recommendations? Why now?
It wasn't about this incident. It was that this is an incident that finally got some attention because there are charges laid because of the video, right? There are many other incidences that we could speak of but have no actual backing because there was no charges laid. So it is ongoing. It's not this one incident. It's very historical, like I stated in my release there. It's ongoing from right back to Starlight Tours. If you're not aware of what Starlight Tours are, go online and Google it. You'll see the book, and it's unbelievable, but it's the reality of Indigenous people across Canada over time since Canada's been established.
A couple of your recommendations. You want an Indigenous member on the police board and an Indigenous advisor for the police service. What difference would that make?
Then our voice is there. Our voice is there, and our worldview is being represented.
Do you know if there are any members of the Indigenous community with the Hamilton Police Service that you can liaise with or have liaised with yet?
There are Indigenous members of the Hamilton Police Services, yes. There is an Indigenous woman who sits on the police board, but it's not an Indigenous specific seat. That's what we're asking for.
What is the relationship between Indigenous people in Hamilton and the Hamilton Police Service? How do you describe it?
Individual. It's an individual thing, right? I, as working in social services, and I'm sure many people who are, don't have those experiences with the police, negative interactions directly, but those that do, they would have a very different experience, just like the person, the victim right now. I'm sure their opinion of the police is different, but the issue is the systemic racism and discrimination that exists in the institution right across the whole criminal justice system, including the police.
And including the Hamilton Police Service?
They are an institution, they are a police service, so yes. Any other questions? No? Thanks for your time and thanks for hearing our message. Have a good day.